So, that GBA video blew up, huh? Well, might as well talk about cozy games instead. There was this one video about how cozy games sucked, and it was pretty average, I'd even say mediocre to my tastes. It was about how farming games suck and how, I don't know, bad writing like in every other kind of video game. And also, indie games cannot make what Nintendo can already make because they can't outcompete the quality of Nintendo. And honestly, I don't think most indie devs care because, you know, an indie game is a passion project most of the time. It's not trying to compete with Nintendo, it's just there. That's the main reason why I see games as art and not as products that you have to outcompete and make better and better and better all the time. That kind of gamer logic is boring to me. I just wanna play some video games and have some actual fun. But either way, the thing about that video is that it made me think, what is a cozy game? Because the term is apparently pretty popular, which is interesting. So what I think the definition of a cozy game is, you know, a video game where you get to relax and just enjoy the moment. And also, apparently, cozy games are a recent phenomenon, which I can say, no. Cozy games have always existed, it's just that we've buried them apparently. So you know what, I'm just going to make a video on some of the old, the weird, the crunchy cozy games of the yore. So let's get it started! What do you do when you play a cozy game? I wanna have some fun! And what kind of fun? Fun, natural fun! So I suppose the first cozy game of all time is Pac-Man, because apparently it was targeted towards couple and wasn't supposed to be serious. It wasn't supposed to be serious, and it wasn't supposed to be serious. So I guess it counts as a cozy game? But I'd say the cozy game that's pretty much closer to the modern definitions than the games were by him, this man, the Yuji Naka, who is in jail. Don't worry, we'll see him again. Either way, Girl's Garden is a game where you're a little girl where you're like, ooh, I gotta get my boyfriend a bouquet. Especially before Stacy comes in and ruins the fun. You, Stacy, curse you. Its themes and ideas are pretty much closer to a cozy game. I'd say that this one is more of an arcadey action experience. So it still ends up being hard anyways. Then there is Barbie. And she's like, ooh, Ken, I want to take you on a date. I need to dress up. Oh, you gotta dress her up for a date. And that's pretty much the whole game. The thing is that it felt revolutionary at the time, but right now, yeah, you can play some dress-up games easy. The internet. Although Flash is dead now. Yeah, I'd say the coziest games we got in the West were pretty much girl-centered games. Since Nintendo and Sega didn't really want to experiment anymore with the cartridge format, it's safe to say it took a while before cozy games started appearing. The closest thing you'd get to that is an action platformer, but even then those would be hard. Meanwhile, on PC, games like Gadget or Myst were very well known for being sort of these cozy experimental games where you get to explore everywhere. It experimented with the point-and-click format and was very interesting, honestly. I'd say aside from Harvest Moon on Super Nintendo, which started a whole genre, took a whole while before we could get some experimental, interesting, and cozy games. But now with CDs being much cheaper than cartridges, it really was accessible to everyone. Even David Bowie made a game. So that's when we got these cozy, stinky, and weird games. Such as, for example, Aquanaut's Odyssey. Aquanaut's Odyssey is a game by Art Inc. and published by Sony Entertainment, where you pretty much explore the ocean, and that's pretty much it. Even the manual tells you that you're on a relaxing vacation, and apparently if you beat the game you can play as fish. Yay, fish! If I remember well, you can also choose your own music, which is quite interesting for the time. But yeah, you pretty much relax and explore everywhere. You can even set up your own warp points, which is also very interesting. Yeah, Aquanaut's Odyssey feels like a precursor to modern indie games. And apparently it had a couple of sequels too. Since we are speaking about 1996, should also talk about the Nintendo 64 before heading further. The Nintendo 64 had two launch games, Super Mario 64 and a sequel to Pilot Wings. Pilot Wings 64 is a mostly mission-based game, but the thing is that there is a free flight mode where you just explore the island, and honestly it's very cozy. Just taking your time to explore and nothing else in the world. There are also apparently some secrets in this mode. But my main point is that Nintendo created a sort of cozy game. They then used that kind of free flight mode in Wii Sports Resort, with a lot of secrets and interesting tidbits, while straight up making a sequel to Pilot Wings on the 3DS using the Woohoo Island from the Wii Sports Resort game. It has almost been 13 years and Nintendo still hasn't made another cozy game like this one. But back to 1997. Casino Notam is a hot air balloon simulator with some missions and it just looks like this. Oh my god, why do I love it so much? Yeah, the graphics might feel dated, but oh my god, just look at that music. If this ain't a cozy game, I don't know what is anymore. The relaxing music, landscapes, and very slow controls, it all feels... Either way, I think this was made by the people who made also Aquanaut's Odyssey, but I could be wrong. But yeah, the thing is just that I vibe with this game. I don't know very much else about it. A cozy game I know a lot about is Moon RPG Remix Adventure. While you are playing the most generic looking RPG of all time, you pretty much get absorbed into it. And whoops, you gotta help the monsters who were defeated by the hero, because you're not the hero, you're just some rando. Meanwhile, the hero is just a jerk, just a total jerk. We hate him, we're supposed to hate him. You have to collect a lot of love, because this game was made by Lovedelic. Their games were all about spreading love in unusual places. But then they got separated and you know the drill. While you're on a time limit, the game wants you to know its NPCs very well, as they all have their routines and their habits and whatever. It's just very interesting game. It even has its own calendar. So while Moon RPG Remix Adventure is great today, back then it was outstanding for this kind of game to exist. It was the power of the PlayStation. The one game I would recommend to anyone is Moon, and it's available on most consoles, which helps. Also, I'd recommend you cozy gamers to play it slowly. You won't be able to do anything in one go, and the title has very strict time limit that becomes less strict over the course of the game as you get love from everybody. The ending also is very hard. There's even a whole ass article in the description about it if you want to. As for other cozy games from this era, there were a lot of pet raising sims and games where you bet on horses, board games, casino, and some minigame collections, etc. This is what cozy games were like back then. The fact that even non-cozy games included these kinds of activities was interesting too. From the fishing minigame in Zelda Ocarina of Time, to the Chao Garden of Sonic Adventure, to the gambling in Pokémon. Even non-cozy games offered cozy activities for casual players. Also, something I forgot to mention is the creation of SimCity, which gave birth to a lot of cozy simulation games, including The Sims, obviously. Sims was a major hit in all countries, and it was pretty innovative for its time. It even expanded on with the expansion packs, which were a very interesting addition, which would later give way to DLC, and you know where this ends. Aside from that, it was also the time when Nintendo decided to make more cozy games for some reason. Such as You Pikachu, which is a game where you accomplish missions with your Pikachu, but also talk to him and do some fun activities. Say it is a very cozy game, but the thing is that the microphone isn't too accurate, so Pikachu will ignore most of your comments, which kinda sucks. I'd still recommend watching a playthrough or something, as the atmosphere and the vibe of the game is very relaxing. It's also worth noting that there is a semi-sequel, but we'll come back to that later, because right now we need to talk about the Nintendo 64 DD. The Nintendo 64 DD was a spiritual successor to the Famicom disk drive, in which you could plug it in your Nintendo 64, but this time play games on floppy disks. It was released very late in the console's lifespan, so it sold very poorly in Japan, slots like the Nintendo 64 itself. But Japan still had a couple of games such as Doshin the Giant. Doshin the Giant is a game where you're a giant who helps people by planting trees and raising or lowering the land and creating water, and it's very interesting as a game. Apparently it also used some real-time features, but I'm not too sure about that. All I know is that it got an expansion pack where you realize missions to free Doshin from a giant cage. And honestly, you just gotta look at the art style and the atmosphere. It's just creepy, like straight out of a creepypasta. Too bad it never got re-released along with the other Doshin game on the GameCube. At the very least, Doshin got released in Europe, so that's a good win. Nintendo also released Animal Forest, which became Animal Crossing, and I have some very mean thoughts about that later. Aside from that, there were very few other titles from the 64 DD, and people were like, well, that's it. Time to move on with the GameCube. Except they move on to the PS2 instead. Yeah, the GameCube sold terribly, especially compared to the Game Boy Advance, because the Game Boy Advance had Amtaro. I'm Taro. I'm Taro. There already was Namtaro on Game Boy, and it's pretty much the same style of adventure game with some puzzles. There also were two on the GBA, apparently one was only released in Europe, so that's something to consider. Namtaro games on the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance all have pretty much the same feeling of a cozy but also risky adventure. It's less about beating the bad guys and more about interacting with the NPCs, because it is a game for children. And honestly, I'd love to see these games be revisited sometimes, but I don't know. Right now, I don't think Nintendo wants to renew the Namtaro license. But hopefully the anime gets a remake and we get something someday. As for the GameCube, we got Pokémon Channel, which is sort of a sequel to You Pikachu, but instead you and Pikachu watch some TV, but also go outside from time to time. While it is an interesting idea for a cozy game, it can get old after a while. Although I honestly think that the localization helped give it some personality. There's also the fact that Jirachi, which was present in the European version, isn't there in the US version. Because Jirachi was actually on a Pokemon Colosseum pre-order disc. Yep, thanks Pokemon. Either way, the thing about You Pikachu in this one is that I think that maybe in the future we'll be able to create something even better using our new kind of technology. Like imagine Pikachu on mobile phones. But I know right now that Game Freak has their hands full due to the Pokemon company who keeps wanting them to make more and more Pokemon all of the time. Either way, now that we have talked about Pokemon, the thing is that the Nintendo DS brought on new possibilities and new ideas, so people could make games as cozy as they wanted. Well, actually, the thing is that the DS attracted a casual demography, so because of that, Nintendogs became a thing. But along with Nintendogs came another franchise from the Nintendo GameCube and the 64 DD. It was Animal Crossing Wild World. I have many feelings about Animal Crossing. It's a cozy game where you go around and you fish and that's pretty much it. And talk to the villagers also. It's very interesting at first. But the thing is that Animal Crossing works with a real-time clock. Sounds interesting as it could provide some interesting ideas, such as celebrating New Year's Eve with Animal Crossing, or celebrating Christmas, or whatever. But the thing about Animal Crossing is that it penalizes the player for not playing enough of it. Villagers move out, the village gets dirty, and you need to pluck all of the weeds. It's just annoying. So the thing about Animal Crossing is that it's not just a game, it's a social activity which you have to take care of over and over and over again. If you don't play enough, well, too bad, you gotta erase your game and restart, because nobody wants to live in a crappy village. No matter how many activities the game throws at me, I'm just like, I want to move on to something else and grow up. Those are my very mean thoughts about Animal Crossing on DS anyways. Wait, did I forget Pokemon Snap? Oops, looks like I totally forgot about Pokemon Snap. This is basically a light gun shooter, but instead you photograph Pokemon at the right time. Definitely call this one a cozy game because there barely is any violence involved. And while you can try aiming for the best score, it doesn't really matter all that much if you do it all in one go. The more pictures you take, the more the professor will give you some upgrades as well as new items for you to use on the Pokémon. The game has many experiments for you to try while using the items you just acquired. It's cozy, it's relaxing, it can be pretty hard if you want to achieve everything, but you can also take your time as much as possible. Overall, I'd say that Pokémon Snap is worth it for cozy gamers, and they should maybe buy it or buy the Nintendo Switch Online. Okay, now back to the present. Well, the present of 2006 anyways. We had launch, so everyone was able to experiment with it, including the Dog Island. As for those who know, well, they know, but those who don't know, they don't know, they don't know. Basically, you play as a dog whose brother is sick, so you have to go find some medicine in order to save him. But here's the thing, the doctor is sad because, you know, one of his patients passed away. And one of his patients is scared of a certain red liquid. So yeah, this game kind of gets dark, even though it is rated E for everyone. But the thing is that the gameplay is very basic adventure game stuff. You walk to people, you talk to people, you bark, and that's pretty much it. So I can easily call this a cozy game. It's just a very dark and horrifying one. And now, the closer that we got to the 2010s, the more that cozy games moved on mobile, began to look more modern. But alas, we have one last cozy game from the 2000s to check out. Somehow featuring this man again. His studio participated on a fishing RPG which apparently is kind of good. Prof made. Let's stop. It's a title that contains 5 game modes, all very different. But you play them by using a box and putting a Wiimote on it, and then you tap. It kind of feels like Donkey Konga, but not really, but whatever. There's a mode where you run and jump, and you know what? That could be a really interesting platformer, and it sort of is. But it's a low-budget game, so it's very limited. There's a flying mode where you pretty much fly and try to avoid the obstacles, and there's also a multiplayer version of this one, if you have more boxes. And there's a tapping rhythm minigame which kind of reminds me of Donkey Konga, but it doesn't have any licensed songs, it's just some very catchy 2000s tunes. There's also a mode that sort of reminds me of Jenga, but it's also kind of a puzzle like Puyo Puyo or Tetris, so I don't know how to feel about that one. The last and most important mode that I want to talk about is Visualizer mode, where you just tap while there are images shown on the screen that are affected by your taps, and honestly, it might last like 15-20 minutes, but honestly, it's really worth it if you're a cozy gamer and just want to tap. Critics really hated this mode and called it shallow, but considering the price of the game, I'm just like, this is a nice little addition. I just wish it wasn't advertised as a big standalone mode, because you're probably gonna play this one less, it's just fun though. So yeah, that's all the cozy games from the old era that I had to show you. So all of you out there who are like, cozy games are just farming and a recent phenomenon, no, it isn't. So yeah, that's all the takeaway you should have from this video, because it's insane. Either way, if you want to find out about even weirder games, well, you should like and subscribe somehow. So yeah, like and subscribe.